Xanthe Mallett is a criminologist who joins me now on this very matter. Thanks for joining us, Xanthe. The first thing I want to ask you about is just how unusual a verdict is in a case like this, a murder case where all of the evidence is circumstantial.
Well, I can only think of one other case that jumps to mind, and that would be Keli Lane back in 2010, where there's no body, there's no forensic evidence, there's no eyewitnesses. And so, this is really quite extraordinary. And we're also looking at a case 40 years ago. So, the combination of those factors and one that is so high profile, we've just been hearing about the Teacher's Pet podcast, over 60 million downloads. Everybody had an opinion on this. So those factors together, this is a once in a career. I doubt I see a case like this again.
Yeah, now, when you talk about something, that lack of physical evidence, of course, that points to what people would talk about as the perfect crime, almost the perfect crime, because you're unable to put together any physical evidence to demonstrate what's going on. So clearly what the judge has relied on very heavily is any comments or claims that he could demonstrate were lies. And it was the lies he was able to pin on Chris Dawson that really uphold this verdict. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I would say the lies that he established that Chris told. So Christopher Dawson said that Lynette had phoned him. He discounted that. And there were other eyewitness reports of alleged sightings, and each one of those were dealt with in the judgment too. So some were just discounted as erroneous, and others were discounted as factually incorrect and intentionally misleading. So he went through each tranche of the defence case and kind of picked that apart. So it was very long. It was 5 hours. I listened to as much of it as I could. And there were clues as we went along as to which way he was going to go. But yeah, those lies that he claims Chris told in view to protecting himself are really what I think it was potentially founded on.
And what about the media role here? Because we all know that the interest in the case generated by Hedley Thomas's journalism and the Teacher's Pet podcast helped to drive police to re-examine. There was also new evidence uncovered. So that really helps to get the case back before the prosecutors and the courts. But at the same time, the defence uses that to suggest that it sways people's evidence. Is there a balance there that we're going to be stuck with forever, or is this a bit of a breakthrough case in the way the judges handled those pressures?
Well, I think the judge handled them very well, but I would correct you in the fact that the police had actually submitted a third brief of evidence to the DPP prior to the Teacher's podcast being released. So the police were actively investigating this. However, I do think without Hedley Thomas's journalism and without the podcast and the social pressure that brought, the DPP might well have rejected that third brief of evidence because of the lack of no body. So whilst it's a double-edged sword, the relevance of the media, the impact of the media, I would totally agree that without Hedley Thomas and that podcast, we may not have seen this result today. But don't underestimate the importance of this to the police, and that they never gave up on Lynette and finding out what happened and supporting that family.
Absolutely, as Hedley Thomas gave them credit for that today, and it's pleasing. It's sobering to think about how this happened 40 years ago without a proper investigation, and pleasing to hear people say that wouldn't occur today. Just finally, Xanthe, I just wonder on where to from here. If there is an appeal, what chance would there be, do you think, that Chris Dawson would actually be bailed during that appeal, which I think would distress a lot of people?
Well, I'd be surprised. It's obviously a very serious charge. I agree that there is likely to be an appeal. The defence will be going through each of those statements that the judge made today, and there are a lot of statements over those 5 and a bit hours. And so they will be looking for any legal avenue of redress for an appeal to be proposed. It won't necessarily be granted. I would be surprised if Chris Dawson is bailed. However, he is an elderly man now. He's 74. And so, they may look more leniently upon him. He's not a flight risk, for example. But I would think, given it is a murder charge, that he will remain behind bars.
Xanthe Mallett, thanks so much for your time.